Welcome back to part two. We're just going to jump right into it, and we're going to talk about the struggles today. So, what were the struggles? This is chapter 7, section 2, part 2. If you would like to go along with your textbook as well. So, the urbanization boom created this new idea of tenements. Before, people would live inside the city or outside the city. If outside the city, transportation was rough. Inside the city, it was very hard to find places. So tenements were single-family dwellings that shared the walls with similar houses. They're kind of like the beginnings of the new forms of apartments. They were wooden, they were tall, they were very tightly packed as well. Um, they would put a lot of people into single blocks, so you have large populations, increasing the density in certain regions of the cities. Um, After some of the families began to leave the cities or find better places to live, the tenements were being replaced by the immigrant families, and they weren't just like one family per apartment like as of before. They were putting two or three families in, so it was even more dense and more tightly packed because these families could not afford the rent of the tenements. So they would just put more people in the same housing, which could become very dangerous over time. As we will talk about in a second, water, like I said, you have water provided for a small group of people and then a large group of people. What do you do? Safe drinking water was difficult to distribute among the growing population. Most cities had inadequate waterworks or even nothing at all, so people would have to provide for themselves. Indoor plumbing was not implemented for the working class and most of the middle class, so it's basically just the rich that had indoor plumbing up until this point. Residents collected water via pails from faucets on the street, or they would just collect the rainwater as well, whatever they can do to be able to drink and to be able to take baths as well. And as you can tell, having unfiltered faucet water is not a completely healthy thing to have and can lead to a lot of diseases as well. Sanitation, overall, very unsanitary. Horse manure would pile on the streets. It was likely that you could just find dead horse carcasses on the ground because whose job is it to clean it up? There were no jobs to clean these things up at the time. Sewage flowed in open gutters. They didn't have sewage systems like we have today. They didn't have piping to flush or anything, so everything was basically outside as well. Smog and smoke in the air and near the factory, in the air near the factories as well. So it would be very hard to breathe or not healthy to breathe in near the factories. And cities were built around factories, so it was before they started separating them to residential and industrial places. It was all just kind of one big, massive industrial center. Crime was becoming rampant. You have a lot more people. You can get away with pickpocketing and whatnot and thievery, and there's not much people can do because there's millions of other people around you at the time. And we're going to talk about fire as well, because if you picture the tenements, these tall buildings made out of wood, uh, they were condensed, and then people were also lighting candles and kerosene and using kerosene heaters as well. It was just chaos waiting to happen, and it didn't wait to happen. It happened a lot to the point where there were almost major fires every single day in cities across the U.S. between 1870 and 1880. There was no sufficient fire because there's no sufficient water supply. You can't really do anything to put out the water fires. So sometimes you just had to wait it out. So to recap, you had these tenements, these tightly packed wooden buildings, these wooden structures that would hold way too many people. You didn't have safe water. You couldn't really get safe water. Couldn't drink things without the risk of getting diseases or anything. There was no trash system. It's very unsanitary. Trash everywhere, sewage everywhere. Not a great call. And then there was also just pickpocketing running rampant. And on top of that, everything is on fire. So just add that to the list of awful things occurring in these cities. So things were really reaching a point of needing reform, but it's like, what do you do about all these issues that are popping up and um, becoming a major issues at the same time? What do you do about those things? And that's a great question. And we're going to go into that in part 4. So I will see you, no, part 3. So I will see you in part 3.